So to simplify this square root, we're looking for perfect square roots that go into it. So the perfect square root that goes into 20 is 4. So hopefully you see this as the square root of 4 times the square root of 5. And the square root of 4 breaks down to 2. So this is 2 square root 5. Now, a big reason why you need to simplify is on multiple choice tests, you won't see this as an answer. This is what you'll see. So you won't be able to find your answer. So it's really important to be able to simplify because your answer will not be there. So this one, we're going to do the same kind of thing but break it up into parts. So first of all, the square root of 54, we're going to start with that. So to break up the square root of 54, well, what square number goes into that? It's 9. 9 times 6. So I'm going to start with the square root of 9 times the square root of 6. Then I have this right here, which is the square root of f squared times the square root of f squared times the square root of f squared, which is really redundant. There is a shorter way of doing it, but the square root of f to the 6 is 3 square roots of f squareds. So if we simplify all these, we get 3 for the square root of 9, the square root of 6 stays, times these 3 things become f's. So we get f to the 3rd, because there's f times f times f. Now, not many people write that way. Let me write the answer. The answer is best written like this. The reason we like to take this and put it out front is because some people will extend that square root bar and try to hide it inside when it shouldn't be. So it's better to be putting these in the front than to behind. Now the bad part about putting in the front, some people then think this is a cube root. So be careful with that too. Either way has some issues, but it's always better to put your stuff in front of the square roots so you don't accidentally extend that square root and think it's inside. So watch out for that. Alrighty, now this one right here, well, the longer way of doing it is, well, let's think of that as the square root of m squared times the square root of m squared times the square root of m. Because that's an odd number, don't I have a 2 plus 2 plus 1? And what's the square root of m squared? Aren't those both m's? But this one doesn't break down. So my answer ends up being m squared square root m. When you have odd powers, it doesn't break, not everything comes out of the square root. It leaves pieces behind. Now, there's another way to do it with radicals, with fractional powers. We could write this, here's another way of doing this, or can we write this as m to the 5 over 2? Which isn't m to the 5 over 2 equal to m to the 2.5? Well, isn't 2.5 mean I have m squared plus a half of an m, or a half root of m? Can you understand that becomes m squared times a half root of m? And isn't a half root of m a square root? Which is m squared times the square root of m. So you can do it either way. Just realize you have to take this 2.5 and realize it's m squared times a half root of m. Either way works. So for this last problem, let's first break down 32. So 32 right here. We're going to break that down. And 32 is the square root of what is a perfect square root? Now some of you would say 4. And 4 goes into it. But isn't 16 the biggest square root that goes into it? Yeah. You have to be careful pulling out the biggest square root possible. And then we have the second part, which is h to the 9th. Well, the square root of h to the 9th would be the square root of h squared times 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 the square root of h. So that becomes 4 times the square root of 2 times 1, 2, 3, 4 h's times the square root of h. Okay, I have a lot of things there. And if we brought those all together, can't we bring those together because they're both outside the square root? So 4h to the fourth. And can't we then take both of these, because they're inside the square root, and put them together back inside as a pair? And that would work. Now, could I also do fractional powers here? Could you go on 9 divided by 2 and realize that is 4.5? 4.5? Yeah? You don't have to. It's up to you. Just did it this way. Again, your call. Just be aware, square roots, everything goes back inside the square root, and if it's out, everything is out, goes in front of the square root.